Now this is one of those tools I didn't really know I needed until I tried it. A special tool to shave your sweaters and get all of the pills off. Instead of using a cheap razor, especially on those hand knits that took you so long to work on, investing in something like the Gleener is really a good thing to have if you're a sweater knitter. Hey nerdy knitter, Tanya here. I'm a certified knitting instructor and a master hand knitter, and I believe knitting is a form of self-care, that you can take time for your hobbies and still knit beautiful garments that you will love to wear. This week's video is all about tools, your favorite knitting tools, and my favorite knitting tools as well. I don't mean notions like stitch markers and small things like that, the things you use while you're knitting. I mean like the bigger tools that you might need once in a while, like a ball winder and a swift. Things like that. So we're going to look at the tools that I always use, my favorite 8 things, and also a selection of comments from you where you shared your favorite tools and resources. There were so many comments, I can't share every single one of them, but I've pulled in a lot that we're going to add to this video as well. And as always, thank you for sharing those comments and your thoughts and opinions with me. I think it really adds something to the video. It's not just me telling you my thoughts and opinions. I can share your thoughts and opinions as well. So thanks for sharing those comments. Now, of course, the first tool we think of when we are knitting is our knitting needles. And when I first started knitting, probably like many people, I bought some cheap needles from Walmart, and I think I had some from Michael's, and those were fine when I started, but when I realized that I was probably going to be knitting a lot, I knew I wanted to invest in better materials. But before diving in and buying an interchangeable set, I decided to try out different brands. So I have like some Knit Pro or Knitter's Pride needles, some Knit Picks needles. I got a fixed circular of Chiaogoo needles, and that's what I decided to buy. They had 4-inch tips, which I really like. My hands, they just seem to fit my hands really well. But you want to try different needle types and materials to see which ones you like before you invest in a big set like this. But of course, if you're going to knit, this is the first tool you need, is some knitting needles. And we have lots of comments from everybody else as well about their favorite needles. Now, Jennifer says, my Chiaogoo interchangeables are my favorites, but I'm falling in love with Lantern Moon when I need something a little more grippy than stainless steel. They are super smooth with a smooth join as well. And she also talks about project bags, which is another thing we'll have to talk about as well. But yeah, I love my interchangeables. Haven't tried Lantern Moon. I'd also like to try Hiya, I hear those have really nice sharp tips too. Personally, I love really good sharp tips and nice slick needles where my yarn can move easily. Except when I'm knitting really slippery yarns, I haven't yet found a good like grippy needle to hold those. So maybe I'll have to check out these Lantern Moon needles. And then the next one says, love my Chiaogoo interchangeable set, as many of us do. I use my Knitter's Pride Mindful DPNs for socks, though I've been trying other methods. 9-inch circular, Hiya flyers are nice. I have noticed 9-inch circulars are easier for continental knitters. I have some shorty needles. They're okay. I'm not in love with them yet though, but I want to give them more of a chance, I think, before I make a firm decision on that. Heidi recommends Knitter's Pride needles. I love that I can mix up my wood and metal needles, the cords, the connectors. It means a lot to me to not have to buy separate sizes of everything just to enjoy my knitting. That's a really good tip too. And I like that you can mix and match the wood and the metal and still use the same cords. That's really good. Then Knitting Apple says, I love the laminated wood needles. I find them to be easier on my hands than metal needles and smoother than bamboo. I almost never knit with anything else. I also love my Squirrel Swift yarn winder, a gift my grandfather made for me. Oh, I love it when you get handmade gifts from family because there's something I cherish as well, and I think that's wonderful. And then Daisy says, I have a set of Chiaogoos again and a set of bamboo interchangeable needles, and they are used for 90% of my knitting. The other critical needles are a long pair of Boyd US 7 needles. And then Maria, for needles, it depends on the yarn I'm using. If it's slippery, superwash, silk, linen, or bamboo, I love to use my Leica Driftwood interchangeable set. If it's wool or lace, I love Chiaogoo sets. The right tools for the job saves time and makes the whole experience a joy. That's so true. I really do think that investing in good needles, it changes your experience. Like I've got some fixed circulars that I started with, and I don't even know what brand they are. They're very cheap store brand type things from Walmart, I believe. And they're just no fun to knit with. Once in a while, I'll still pull them out if I want to do a quick swatch, and I don't enjoy knitting with them. They're just, I think because the cords stay curled up, and I'm so used to the Chiaogoos that that memory free cord, so they don't have that weird curl in them. But Yeah, good tools for the job. That's definitely good advice, Maria. Then Angela says, my Chiaogoo red lace interchangeables are a must. Best gift I've ever received. I loved them so much that I got the same version in a Tunisian crochet set. I didn't know they had Tunisian crochet ones. That's nice. Pamela, I love my Knit Picks interchangeable needles. They're a great price and I have much success with them. I haven't tried their interchangeables. We've done a few giveaways with them, but I have tried their fixed, and I have a few for fixed circulars that I like for different sizes for sock knitting, and they are very nice. Sarah also recommends her Chiaogoo circular needles, the cables especially. I agree, those cables are nice. As someone with ADHD, the feelings of using needles where the cables curl or warp is just triggering, but the coated steel cables don't do that at all. Yes. And Purple Unicorn, my 4-inch interchangeable Chiaogoo set with the 8-inch cord. Definitely, I love those. Then McKee also mentions the Chiaogoos, but she says fixed circulars, especially the 16-inch with the bent tips, and also she likes Hiya sharps as well. I'd like to give Hiya's a try. And then one more, I have interchangeable needles, but I prefer the attached cords. Chiaogoo is my go-to must-have brand. Their cords are flexible and sturdy, the joins are smooth. And then she mentions a ball winder and Swift, and that's what we're going to talk about next, a ball winder. Now, some people love to wind their yarn by hand when it comes in a skein. I don't love that. I can do it occasionally, but I really do like a ball winder. I have one from Knit Picks. What's really interesting is a local store here. It's called Fabricville, but I'm in Quebec. I'm not sure what the name of the store is in the other provinces because sometimes it can change to sort of a French version. And they sell Knit Picks, not the yarn, but like the tools and things in the store. That's where I bought my first Knit Picks needles, was actually in this fabric store of all places. And what I found was kind of funny is because the labeling has to be in French in Quebec as well. So I don't know how to pronounce bobinus or whatever, but my daughter calls it the bobinus. That's what she calls the ball winder. I just keep it in the box, but it's in there. But yes, they're French packaging. So, well, French and English, but in Quebec, you have to have the French packaging because it's officially, French is the official language in this province. So if you have, I'm not sure, I think there is another name for Fabricville, because I think they are in the other Canadian provinces as well. You might be able to find Knit Picks products there too. But I just thought that was my first experience with Knit Picks. I didn't actually see the website first. I saw them in a store, which now I know is kind of odd for a lot of people since they buy Knit Picks things online. But so yes, I've got my bobbin use, as my daughter calls it. And I'm not the only one who loves my ball winder. Marlette mentions her Chiaogoo needles as well. But then I have a ball winder and Swift that get a lot of use. And then she mentions her favorite things actually dye her own yarn, which is also really nice. And if you're going to do that, then yes, a ball winder and a Swift and maybe even a Nitty Naughty are essential for dyeing your own yarn and then getting it back into a skein and then a ball. It's a lot of processing there that you've got to do with that yarn. And then another comment, also her Chiaogoo needles, and then a large capacity ball winder that she loves as well. Now mine is not a large capacity, and I do notice sometimes if it's like a really large skein, I haven't had to like break it and split it into like a separate cake, but it gets pretty big. But other than that, my ball winder is still going strong. And then Pink Panda Miranda, good username. Ball winders are amazing and have totally changed my knitting game. And knitting baskets makes it so much easier to know which projects are where, and I can carry them all over the house. I like that. I do have some baskets that keep stuff on the shelf behind me. All my knitting projects are back there. And then the next one, the Standwood Needlecraft Large Metal Yarn Fiber Wool String Ball Winder is amazing. So another one that's a really big one. The distal arm that rotates with the winder to wrap the yarn is a game changer. It will wind anything smoothly and without tangles, from lace to bulky, in any fiber without issues. I tried 2 other winders before this one with lots of fails and lots of frustration. Not with the Standwood. The Standwood is my ride or die. She got hers on Amazon and would definitely recommend. Now, I haven't tried a Standwood, but I hear lots of good things about it, so that's good to know. Then Stacy, who mentions her Hiya's, and she hates Chiaogoos. Maybe we need to do a poll about that, about favorite yarn or needle brands. And I always have a crochet hook handy, and I love my sock ruler, and her Standwood ball winder is one of her best investments. And then Jenny, I use my ball winder in Swift all the time. Mine are old but reliable. Her Glimacra Swift is a wooden umbrella type, bought at a yarn shop in Utah at least 20 years ago. My ball winder is a Royal. They both have permanent spots on a sewing work table in my yarn room. Eventually, when I have more space, that is my hope, that I can have like a little workbench type thing where I can set up a Swift and a ball winder and keep them set up all the time, because I use them quite a lot, but I don't have the space for that, so I have to put them like on my dining room table, which right now is covered in a big puzzle because it's winter, and over Christmas I like to do puzzles, and I still have one big one that's taking up a lot of space, so it's a good thing I don't have to wind any yarn right now because I'd have to put it on top of the puzzle. Anyway, so along with a ball winder, we have to talk about a Swift, of course, because they do kind of come in handy to use them together. Now my Swift, I still have it in the box from Amazon, is a Standwood, and it's just plain wood. It's two arms like this, and you have two little legs that you cross, and you set everything together with a little wooden peg. Everything's just pieces of wood set up in like maybe 30 seconds, very, very quickly. Works really well because there's nothing really mechanical about it. It's just pieces of wood. The other option is an umbrella Swift, which sort of clamps to the table, and then you put your skein of yarn around it and then open it up like an umbrella, and it holds it in place that way. This type comes with little wooden dowels that you can move. You can see the holes right there, so you can place them further and further apart or closer together depending on how big or how large the circumference of that skein of yarn is that you're trying to unwind and put into a ball or a cake. Now, of the two, I think I would get a ball winder first if you can only afford one, because a skein, like the hank of yarn or skein of yarn, you can sort of drape over a couple of chairs or something like that, and that will work as well. Or maybe the other way. Could be just as easy to put it on a Swift and then wind the ball by hand. I don't know, what do you think? Which would you, if you could only get one, which one would you get first? A Swift or a ball winder? That feels like another poll that we should have. Of course, you had comments about your yarn Swifts as well. Knitting Apples, like we said before, she has a Swift yarn winder that her grandfather made for her. Sarah Lindy, a Swift absolutely changed my life. If you buy a lot of yarn that is put up in a skein, I highly recommend. Me too. Then McKee says, I traded my umbrella Swift for a tabletop one, often referred to as an Amish Swift. Yep, I think that's what mine is called actually. Easier to store because everything is separate, and manage in a small apartment as I can set it up anywhere. Very true. If I had a permanent spot, I think I would want to try an umbrella Swift though. And then Karen, she has a lot to say about knitting needles as well, but then right down at the bottom, she says, the other things that revolutionized my yarn crafting is a cheap ball winder and a tabletop Amish style Swift. These made winding so much easier and faster. They aren't fancy, and maybe someday I will want better ones, but they work, and I can pack them up to keep my tiny humans from destroying them. Yes, that's very true. You can hide them away. Now, if you're a sweater knitter, you need somewhere to dry those sweaters. Of course, you can use like blocking mats or towels or trash bags or anything like that, but my favorite thing is a sweater dryer. This kind has hooks. I'm not going to pull it apart right now because it's really big, and if I did, it would be like a comedy sketch trying to get this thing. Every time it sort of bounces open, it scares me a little. Like a Jack-in-the-Box, it has that kind of effect. But I got this one from Knit Picks. They have a couple different sizes. They have a smaller round one that's 2 levels. I'm actually eyeing that. I might get a second one, but it's nice because the hooks mean that I can just hang it over my shower curtain rod, but it also fits really well in like my laundry closet, my washer and dryer in a closet, and it can sit like on top of a laundry basket and the back of the washer and dryer, and that all holds it in place as well, so it's not like hanging out in my shower. If somebody wants to use the shower, it's out of the way. So I love to use that when I want to dry a sweater, because the air can get, you know, all on every side of the sweater, and the sides are wire, but they're covered with cloth, and if I have washed my socks at the same time, I can hang them on like the wire edging as well, which is really nice. Now, of course, I can't use it for actually blocking anything because you need to stretch and pin and stuff like that, but if you think of washing as just, I think of just blocking as just washing. The pinning part is optional. So like after I've washed a sweater, like this one probably needs to get washed, I will put it on that to dry, and it works really well. I don't need to stretch or pin or do anything to most of my sweaters. Sometimes, like I've got a few that have some lace detailing, but I will wash and let them dry, and then I'll take like a handheld steamer to those to open up the lace after if I have to. But I definitely recommend some kind of a mesh sweater hanger if you're going to knit sweaters. so your sweaters have somewhere to dry without being, you know, like laid out on your bed or something like that. Now this is one of those tools I didn't know I needed till I tried. In my past, before I was a knitter, whenever I had a sweater that was starting to pill, I would usually just like pick them off by hand, or I'd use like a cheap razor, like that I would shave my legs with, one of those, and just like sort of run it across the top to get rid of the pills. But I was nervous about trying that method with hand knit sweaters. I think like for a bulky sweater it might be okay, but a special sweater shaver is a good investment, I think. Unless you have good luck with using just a cheap razor, then I'm not brave enough to try that. This particular one is called a Gleener. It's got a lint brush thing on one side, and then the other side has a place where you can put 3 different attachments. It comes with a little bag and a little booklet, because you use these different attachments depending on like the fineness or the sturdiness of the fibers, and they just sort of, here, let me put this stuff down. They sort of just pop into there. Like to take it out, you just pop that off, kind of like a razor where you can change the heads on them. And this is the size I need for this sweater because I need to depill it again. It gets very pilly very fast because it's not like a tightly spun yarn. So all it does, it just pops right on, just like that. So when I want to depill my sweater, you just run it across it, up and down or whichever way. Then of course I would recommend laying your sweater flat to do this, but you just run it over your sweater and depill it. And of course, like most women, most of my pills are where my arms rub against my sides and down the sleeves as well. Ooh, and you can see I just collected a whole bunch right there just from doing that. That's all you would do. Of course, lay it flat to do it. Don't do it while you're wearing it. But I really like this. I feel like it's maybe gentler than like a regular old razor would be, and it works really well. And then you just have all the little fibers you can collect and throw away or save for something. I don't know what, maybe stuffing little hexapuffs. If you're going to knit one of those quilts, you could save all your pills for that. But I feel like that's just saving too much extra stuff, so maybe not. Now, I've mentioned this one before in other videos, but I wanted to mention it here too because I do think this is more of a tool than a notion. A neck light. Now, this is not any particular like wonderful brand. It's actually kind of cheap, and the light doesn't last a very long time, but it's easy to charge, and it just sits around your neck and you can adjust it, and it's got like 3 different levels of lighting. I don't want to blind you, so I'm just going to point it downward, but you just keep clicking until it's like the brightness you want, and you can do 1 or 2. And if you're very bored and you want to annoy your kids or your husband, point it at the wall and start doing finger puppets or something like that. I did that the other night. We were watching, I can't remember, but I was bored and I was knitting, and then I happened to notice you could see my hands on the wall, so I started, you know, like doing shadow puppets or something anyway. But this is great if you like to knit in the evening and it's dark. It's winter time, so it feels like it's dark forever here. And especially like in the evening when I want to like have everything calm and quiet and lights turned down, I can't see my knitting. So just to have like some direct light right on my knitting but not shining in my face is really nice. So I like it for that. Or if even during the day, if I'm using like a dark yarn, like I did some black fingering weight mittens, and when I was picking up stitches for the thumb, oh my word, it was broad daylight, but I still used this as well to give me some extra light. So definitely worth an investment. You can just like pop neck light into a search on Amazon and find lots of different ones. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this one, but it was purchased just on Amazon, but they're a very useful knitting tool. And I'm not the only one who thought so. Kimu says a good light is a must also. I'm getting older and find that those around the neck versions of LEDs are nice. I prefer a large craft lamp over my workspace, but they can be cumbersome or unavailable. I agree. I have a lamp that I use like if I'm doing like working on overhead tutorial stuff or knitting right at my desk. I have a lamp that has like different daylight and nighttime settings, so I can turn it right up to the brightest setting, and that's really nice too. And then Esther says, I love all my tools, such as my Chiaogoos and Leica, ball winder, and Swift, but my number one has to be my standing OttLite lamp. It illuminates everything. I hear good things about OttLites, but I've never tried one of those myself, but definitely something to look at as well. I think I've seen them at Michael's, at least here in Canada, different OttLites, and I guess those are very bright, really good lighting for things like knitting and other projects and crafting things. Now, another thing that doesn't really end up on many people's lists is just a small digital scale. I use this quite a lot. Now, I use it as a designer because I need to know like how much yarn a project is using so I can tell knitters how much yarn they need to buy and then use that to grade out the other sizes for like the yardage requirements for all those sizes. But as a knitter, I also use it. If I'm running low and I want to make sure I'm going to have enough for my project, I will weigh my skein and then knit 1 or 2 rows and then weigh my skein again. And then that gives me an idea of how much yarn I'm using for each row that I'm knitting. Then I can use that to figure out if I'm going to have enough for however many rows I have left in my project. So it's a good way to avoid playing yarn chicken. It's also useful if I'm going to be knitting a project with some scrap yarn, like if you're knitting some sort of a scrappy project and you want to make sure you have enough of all your little scrappy bits to make sure you have enough like total yarn yardage for the project that you're considering, then you can use a scale to weigh all those little scrappy bits to make sure you have enough. Then of course another essential is someplace to block your projects. And when I mean blocking, I mean washing and then letting it dry somehow. Sometimes that means drying it on a flat surface. For that, I just use these kids' play mats that I got, I don't even remember where, Walmart maybe, or even the dollar store. I'm not sure. I got a couple sets of them so they can all interlock and I can push pins into them. I would like to get some nice ones that have like grid lines on them, so those look very useful. Like if you really want to get a nice straight edge, you can use like the grid lines on there, but these work just as well. And of course you need pins, and the ones I like to use are just like these little yellow top, like the little flower heads. They work well, they're rust proof, so they're not gonna like just like end up rusting my projects. The only annoying thing is like the little yellow heads can pop off occasionally, but they're pretty inexpensive, and I ended up buying quite a few because during the master's program you're knitting so many swatches, you have to block them, and they're very particular about how you block your swatches. I did okay on my first level. On my second, level 2, I got sloppy and they pointed it out that I wasn't very careful with my blocking. My edges weren't nice and neat, and so pins, lots and lots of pins. The other thing I like is the knit blockers. These are Knitter's Pride. It's like a whole group of pins on one little thing like that. So you can just poke everything in all at once. This is nice for straight edges. I like them for shawls, but also for shawls, especially lace, I would recommend getting some blocking wires as well. Mine still are in the tube from, I think these are from Knit Picks. They are just wires, just simple metal wires. Nice and straight. That's a whole bunch of them in here. But I love these when I have like a lace shawl. And I can sort of run the wire through like the garter stitch edges or the picots on the edge, or like the points if there's like a pretty edging on there, and then use pins to hold it all straight and then stretch it with the other wire on the other side or whatever. But these are really nice. I do recommend wiping them down when you buy new ones, because sometimes they can still have like the whatever like machine grease that's on them, and you want them clean, of course, for your knitting. So I periodically wipe them down just to make sure they're clean, but I definitely did when I first got them. I think I just used like some Clorox wipes or something just to get any residual machine grease off them. But I highly recommend if you are a lace knitter. I don't really use them for much else. Sometimes for scarves and things like that, because you can run the wires up the edge and then pull them straight, so it keeps a nice straight edge. It is nice for that as well. There's a few more comments I wanted to highlight. First of all, project bags and baskets, and basically project storage, which I didn't get into that with all of our talk of tools. I've got 2 baskets here. One is like upcoming projects, one is projects in progress, and each of the projects are in their own sort of drawstring bag. I've got a few other like project bags, but I haven't invested yet in any like really nice expensive knitting bags. I just have drawstring bags that I get from different places. I think when I go to a yarn festival or something like that, I like to get like if the festival itself is selling like a drawstring bag, then it's a nice way to remember the trips you've been on and the places you've been. Then Kimu says a great project bag doesn't have to be super fancy, expensive, or even designed for knitting, but it should inspire you in some way. I have a couple of project bags that I love, and they help inspire me to pick them up and work on the creation inside. I really love that. That's really nice. I do have one that I bought, I think she's on Etsy. I don't know if she has her own website, Jezabelle, and her bags are really nice. I bought like a small sock knitting size. It's over there on the other side of the camera. I can't get to it from here, but it's sort of like an over your arm bag made like with like this heavy duty canvas type material. It's a very nice bag. I do like that one. That one I use a lot for small things, swatches and socks when I'm around the house because I can drape it over my arm. But most everything else goes into a drawstring bag. But I like this idea of inspirational bags. Pink and Miranda ball winders, which we've talked about, and knitting baskets, which we've also mentioned earlier. So that's a great way to keep your project organized, or projects, multiple projects. Are you a one project person at a time, or do you have multiples? I usually have a few, but I have rules. I can't have more than one sweater at a time, or more than one colorwork project at a time. Unless the sweater's colorwork, then I don't count. That's two separate things. But I find I get overwhelmed if there's too many choices, but I do like to have a few. So I usually have 3 or so, and then maybe a crochet project too. And then Craig, he says his Chiaogoos as well. Can't have enough. He has the 4, 5, and 5-inch lace interchangeables. So that's lots of needles, Craig. And then there's a crafter that makes project bags that are divided in half with a small pocket. They are perfect to do 2 at a time, socks or colorwork. The pocket fits the basics, your scissors, stitch markers, measuring tape, and gauge. Fireweed Studios out of Palmer, Alaska on Etsy. Well, good recommendation there. So if you want to check that out, then go check out those project bags. And then project bags and yarn cozies to hide my stuff from pet hair. Yes, very true. And a small notebook to write notes, and my iPad to watch something while knitting, and of course my interchangeable needles. Now continuing on our topic of storage, because you have to store your projects, but you also have to store everything else. I just got a new bookshelf so I could upgrade my storage, and I am finding I've got to store. There's a lot of knitting things that you end up having to store. And Yo-Yo Creative talks about that. Well, she talks about a pattern reader first, then in the second half. Other than that, an organized storage method for knitting needles is a must. My mom made me a book out of fabric with pockets that holds my circular needles, and I use stitch markers, small pendants with numbers hung onto safety pins to mark each pocket with the size of needles inside. That's a really good idea. That's a really nice gift. I love handmade gifts like that. And the last one, a ball winder, because she can't stand yarn barf, and her Chiaogoo interchangeable set. I got to the point that I just love my needles too much to use any others. And my Google Drive might not be considered a tool, but it's perfect for me to access my patterns everywhere. Now, I do think that is a tool. It's a digital tool, right? So like Knit Companion and all of those things that we use, those are tools. They're just digital. And I agree. I keep all of my patterns, all the digital patterns, I have them stored in a Google Drive folder. Then I can separate them into other folders, like for sweaters, summer tops, shawls, which I also have subdivided it according to shawl shape. So Google Drive or some other form of iCloud storage is a good way to keep your digital patterns organized. Now, those are my favorite knitting tools, but I'm sure you have your favorites as well, and I would love to hear about them. Is there something we didn't discuss that you would consider it a knitting tool? Leave a comment and share it with us, or if you want to add your thoughts or opinions about any of the tools that we've discussed, leave a comment about that. I love to read what you have to write and tell me about, and it could show up in a future video. And if you want to keep hanging out, I'm going to put a video right here about knitting notions, not tools, but notions, stitch markers and little things like that we use while we're knitting. So you can click right there, and I'll see you in the next video.